A look at the new late 2014 Mac Mini, which is receiving a long overdue update it hasn't seen since late 2012, so that's a pretty long run. Mini is arriving with some controversy because they've eliminated some of the top tier configurations. So you can no longer get a Core i7 quad-core processor. Instead, the best you can do is a Core i7 dual-core clocked at 3 GHz. They've also eliminated the server edition, so you can no longer get a 2 TB configuration of the Mac Mini. The best you can do is 1 TB, either a hard disk drive, a Fusion drive, or an SSD. And more importantly, although they haven't updated the design of the Mac Mini, they've actually removed the user upgradable RAM sticks. So that means you're going to have to upgrade the RAM when you order your Mac Mini. Now I'm going to take a look at the base configuration of the Mac Mini, which is similar in spec to the MacBook Air. So it comes with a dual-core Intel Core i5 clocked at 1.4 GHz. We have 4 gigs of RAM and a 500 gig hard disk drive, which spins at 5400 RPM. So no SSD standard like you get in the MacBook Air. Now the design of the Mac Mini is mostly unchanged here, which dates back to mid-2010. So once again, we have this aluminum unibody design that's 7.7 inches by 7.7 inches square and only 1.4 inches thick. So nice compact computer. Now inside the box, you'll see that we no longer have any DisplayPort adapters that used to come with the Mac Mini. Of course, DisplayPort is now more ubiquitous than it was before, and then we have HDMI on here as well. Now inside we'll find a literature packet, which includes a quick start guide, some regulatory and warranty information, along with some Apple stickers. And then we'll find our power cord. Once again, there is no external power supply with this tiny computer, it's all built in. Now getting back to the Mac Mini, once again we have that black plastic Apple logo toward the top, which acts as an RF transparent window for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and that sort of thing to work through the metal chassis of the Mac Mini. Now once again on the front of the Mac Mini we have an RF receiver for using this with a remote control, although one isn't included. You could use Apple's remote control or any universal remote control. And right next to that we have a little LED status light. Now hidden on the back of the Mac Mini is all of our I/O ports, which have been slightly redesigned here for the new generation. So you can see that we have our power button along with our power port and our gigabit Ethernet port. You also find our HDMI output, and you'll see 2 Thunderbolt 2.0 ports. We used to have a Thunderbolt 1 port and a FireWire 800 port, so now it's just Thunderbolt 2.0. Then we have our 4 USB 3.0 ports, which is carried over. And then we have an SD-XC card slot. And we have an audio input and output jack, which also incorporate optical audio outputs if you use the right adapter. So all those home theater geeks will like that. Now, once again, on the bottom of the Mac Mini, we have a circular pedestal. But the difference this time is that you can no longer pop this off to gain access to those RAM sticks. So you used to be able to just kind of twist it off. In fact, they give you little thumb ports for twisting off the back panel, but that's completely eliminated. This is not meant to be user removed. But if you did pry this panel off like iFixit did, you'll find just a metal plate which is secured by Torx security screws. So again, this is not meant to be user accessible. All right, so let's go ahead and connect up our Mac Mini so we can take a look at performance. Now, of course, with a Mac Mini, you'll need to supply the display, keyboard, and mouse. Now, they can be anything. You do not need to use Apple's equipment, which of course costs quite a bit. So in my case, I'm using a Thunderbolt display, an Apple keyboard, and an Apple mouse, which together cost quite a bit more than the Mac Mini. But you can use anything. You can use your existing equipment. You can use much cheaper equipment. Now, of course, the Mac Mini does support HDMI or DisplayPort, but if your monitor doesn't, you'll have to buy an adapter. Now, although the base CPU is clocked at 1.4 GHz, the performance is actually very similar to the 2.5 GHz it replaces from last year. So that's the benefit of Haswell over Ivy Bridge. So if we take a look at our Geekbench 3 scores, this reveals a single core score of 2418 and a multi-core score of 5142. That single core score is actually up just slightly, but the multi-core score is down from the previous model. Now, if we compare this to the top-end 5K iMac I just reviewed, obviously there is a big difference here in processing power from the baseline to our top-tier iMac. Next test is Cinebench to test out the integrated Intel HD Graphics 5000 processor, which reveals improved but still low-end performance. So the OpenGL scored about 23.78 frames per second, and the CPU scored about 228. That's a fraction of the 5K iMac with a 4 gig GPU. Now, perhaps the biggest weakness of the baseline iMac Mini is the standard 5200 RPM hard disk drive, which is pretty slow. Now, if you take a look at the read and write speeds, they clock in just above 100 megs per second. Now, if we compare this to the MacBook Air, which has a standard SSD, there is a massive speed difference. This means the load times for the OS and apps are significantly quicker, which makes the system feel much faster. Now, of course, you can get an SSD in the Mac Mini if you build to order one. Now, if you really want to push your baseline Mac Mini, you can edit 4K video in a professional editor like Final Cut Pro. However, the Mac Mini does struggle with only 4 gigs of RAM, so scrubbing, clipping, editing your timeline can be a slow process, although 4K video plays back just fine on the Mac Mini, even on a 4K monitor. Now, export times of the Mac Mini are surprisingly good. A roughly 3-minute 4K video using compressor exported in 3 minutes and 18 seconds. That same project on the 5K iMac was only 25 seconds quicker. Now, once again, the Mac Mini has an internal speaker, which is really just there to get you by. You're going to want to connect a set of speakers, or you're going to want to use headphones, or you can buy a display that has internal speakers, like the Thunderbolt display I have here. So let's go and take a listen at the internal speaker and then switch it over to the display.
And 27-inch iMacs, which are carried over unchanged. Now, for the most part, the Retina
identical to the existing non-Retina 27-inch iMac, but adds a 5K display and upgraded internal specs.
Now, ultimately, this is a full-featured Mac loaded with Yosemite and all the software you need from iWork to iLife. This works great for almost all daily tasks, from email to web browsing to light photo and video editing. This is not intended for power users who edit in 4K, work with 3D projects, or gamers who should consider the upgraded models with Intel Iris graphics. Although this Mac is still capable of decent gaming performance with lowered settings. Now, ultimately, this baseline Mac is for very price-sensitive shoppers, so I don't think there's a need to upgrade the baseline configuration. Now, if you do start spending money on the Mac Mini at all, I would upgrade to the $699 configuration, which gets you a much more powerful CPU, more storage, a better graphics processor, and more importantly, 8 gigs of RAM standard. Alright guys, so that's going to do for me in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.